Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join today.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Commonwealth Club. And we are so happy to welcome an audience here in person in San Francisco, safely here on our headquarters in the Embarcadero, as well as our friends online. I'm Gloria Duffy, President and CEO of the club, and I am so happy to welcome you to today's program focusing on hot trends in technology. If you wish to find out more about the Commonwealth Club and its programs, please visit us at commonwealthclub.org. We're very pleased that this program is being held in partnership with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, the Foundation, Leadership Group Foundation Center, California Center for Innovation. This program is also sponsored by Ford, KPMG, our friends at Silicon Valley Bank, and NASDAQ. It's said that the best venture capitalists look around corners, and today some of the best VCs will share what they see. Before we get started, I'm very pleased to welcome to the stage Ahmad Thomas, CEO of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. Ahmad?
Thank you so much, Gloria. On behalf of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group Foundation, we are thrilled to welcome you all here today. We have a small but mighty audience here in person, and so many of you joining us virtually. As you know, we have a dynamic, thought-provoking group of panelists. I know we're going to learn a lot today. We're talking about non-obvious tech trends. One thing that I hope is obvious is our need to support and invest in the innovation infrastructure here in Silicon Valley and across the Bay Area region, and support our entrepreneurs of color and our women entrepreneurs as they seek to access capital and funding. That's a core mission of ours at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, and we look forward to working and partnering with all of you to advance that important cause and catalyze needed change. I am thrilled to announce my colleague, Dr. Brian Brennan, to bring out the moderator for today's program. And again, welcome. Thank you all for joining us.
Ahmad, thank you, and everyone welcome. The California Center for Innovation is the Silicon Valley Leadership Group's foundation's effort not to take innovation for granted in California. We do that through data and analytics around emerging technologies, from fintech to automated trucking. We do that through our partnership with the UC Berkeley Goldman School's Cal 100 initiative and their effort to map the technology ecosystem here in California. And finally, we do it through programs like this, where we have the brightest minds in Silicon Valley talking about technology and what it means to our region and our world. Before we get into our program, I want to tip my hat to Karen Tucker and her team at the Churchill Club. As many of you will know, for nearly 2 decades, the Churchill Club convened conversations just like this with leading thinkers in venture capital. We are building on that legacy and are humbled to stand on their shoulders. Later on in the program, we'll be hearing from trailblazing technology investor Cathie Wood, so please stay tuned for that. But now it is my great honor to introduce the panel that we are going to be listening to right now. First, Ora Adeyemi is Managing Director at HSBC Global. His previous firms include Dubai Holdings, Booz Allen Hamilton, and Hewlett Packard. For the last 2 years, he's been named to the Global Corporate Venture Power List. Ora, welcome and thank you for being here. Also with us is Naveen Chadha, Managing Director of the Mayfield Fund. During his venture capital career, Naveen has invested in 50 companies. 17 of those have IPO'd, 25 have been acquired. Overall, his portfolio has created more than $60 billion in equity value and more than 40,000 jobs. Naveen, we're delighted you're here. Thank you. Sarah Goa is General Partner at Greylock. Since she joined their investment team in 2013, she's led Greylock's investments in companies from Clubhouse and Clio to Demixta and many others. Her interests range from infrastructure and cybersecurity to artificial intelligence and the future of work. Sarah, thank you for being here. Finally, Byron Dieter is a partner at Bessemer Venture Partners, where he's established himself as a true industry leader in cloud computing. His investments, 14 of those exceed $1 billion in valuation. 8 of those have been IPOs. Byron, we're delighted you're here. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have one of the really great journalists covering venture capital today here with us to moderate this conversation, Candy Chang from Insider. Candy, the floor is yours.
Thanks to all of our panelists for being here today. Before we get into your picks for top tech trends, I'd like to pose a few questions to set the stage a little bit. First question is, how has the pandemic year shifted your investment thesis and impacted thought leadership around the trends you plan to present today? We'll go in order of how we are seated, so are you up first?
Well, thank you so much, Candy. It's an honor to be here. Thank you to the organizers. The pandemic, first of all, I'm grateful to be alive, to be out there, seeing people. This is the first time for me to be actually in a setting like this. Been working from home and communicating with my folks in London for a while. In terms of how things have shifted for us or how we looked at things, I think initially when the pandemic started, it was a matter of focusing on our portfolio. So there was an emphasis on our portfolio, really understanding what their needs were going to be because nobody knew what the future was going to hold. So there was an increased focus on portfolio, not necessarily new investments as such. But over time, the deals started happening. I think about 6-7 months into the pandemic, it was clear that life was going to go on in terms of investment. So we're able to get deals done, although with still the focus on portfolio and making sure that our portfolios were, had enough sufficient cash because, in terms of fundraising, it could be difficult going forward. In terms of how it's influenced the trend that I'm going to talk about, I think it's influenced it a great deal. It's related to the future of work. There's been discussions around the Great Resignation. So I think the pandemic I'm just going to have you stay tuned. I'm going to keep you in suspense. But the pandemic has had a major influence on what I'm going to be talking about and it's around the future of work.
Naveen?
Absolutely. Very similar to what was mentioned. Start with money in the ground and make sure which companies are going to survive and be alive. Get them well financed, and then start looking at what are the new areas. And one of the areas I'm going to talk about is biology. And people have talked about software eating the world. I think biology won't eat the world. It will save the world. And there are many other areas, but I'll let it pass to the other panelists, but that's what I'll focus on today.
And you, Sarah?
The pandemic has dramatically changed the lives of consumers and how we do business, right? I think like many others, we were privileged to realize that tech businesses are among the most resilient when you have a global crisis like this. So we quickly moved onto the offense, as my fellow panelists have been describing, and then across a huge range of dimensions from, Roblox and Discord and gaming to Utmost and Remotion and the future of work. There are so many dimensions where we think this is just the beginning. As the venture capitalists, you often ask, why now? And the why now is obvious for all of these changes now.
I'm going to pose a different question for you. In the spring of 2020, Sequoia Capital sent out a famous memo now, widely circulated memo called the Black Swan. And to everyone's surprise, it actually has been a really good boom cycle for the venture capital industry. So my question to you is, how long do you expect the good times to last? And what has surprised you the most in terms of changes in the industry in the last 18 months?
So when to hit sell and when to run. I'll try to answer it from the fundamentals perspective. And I would echo the surprise about if you told us that we were going to have the greatest health crisis and economic displacement of our generation, over this 18-month period and asked us to to guess where the NASDAQ and S&P 500 and things would be, I'm pretty sure we all would have missed by a wide mark. And one of the benefits of the government's response, and certainly pumping trillions of dollars into the economy, is that we've at least minimized the economic displacement while dealing with the health crisis. And that has absolutely been an enabler for a number of tech trends that were already the underpinnings. In my world, cloud computing is where I spend most of my time. And that was a pull forward of many years of adoption there. It's very hard to use on-premise software if you're not on-prem. And so those trends will continue. They will persist. They were accelerated and they were amplified by this movement. And those aren't going to change. People talk about, okay, was this a once in a lifetime phenomenon? And are people going to stop using Zoom? Are they going to stop using DocuSign? Are they going to stop using Twilio or, Zendesk or Salesforce? And the answer is no. And so I don't think those fundamental drivers are going to change. What will change is when interest rates go up and when free money gets pulled back, we're going to see a dramatic change in multiples. And so my hope is that it'll be gradual and that over the coming quarters or years, we will see this settling as the economy deals with the capital influx and you go through this adjustment cycle. But history suggests there will be bumps along the way. And so from our standpoint, we're definitely heads down and aggressively investing, thinking long term, because we're not public market traders, but very mindful that the exit scenarios for today's new investments will probably be very different from the Toast IPO of last week, which was incubated in our office and, the biggest vertical SaaS software IPO in history. We never would have expected the multiples it'd be trading at.
Yes. Naveen, you recently wrote a very thoughtful piece called What is Happening to Risk-Taking in Venture Capital. I'll let you quickly summarize it. But Sarah, I wanted to get your reaction because Greylock just raised $500 million to focus on seed deals. And now you're competing directly with Naveen. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on his piece.
I think we're cooperating.
This will be good.
Yeah.
The market
Let's go.
The market is big enough, right?
I appreciate that, Kenny, but I'd start with Naveen's premise is like, the trigger for us we are not asset gatherers, right? And the trigger for us to go raise additional capital to focus on day one investing is we saw more and more opportunity. We saw the ambitions of entrepreneurs grow. And we wanted to declare there is actually a way to partner with a venture firm very early in your life cycle where, the environment is very different than it was 9 years ago when I started in venture. One could say that capital is increasingly commoditized, but partnership is not, right? Mm-hmm. And so, it was a time for us to put a mark in the ground that, we are here to be early stage investors. The first premise is we want to be in the fundamental technology companies of the future. Mm-hmm. Within that, we'd prefer to be early stage investors. And it's where we focus our practice. And we want to do that more than we have been. And to continue to declare that's our place in the ecosystem. I think Naveen and I are probably in agreement on a lot of this.
Absolutely. And I think the purpose of my observation was it was primarily to all the blogs that were going out on it's the end of venture capital. Yeah. Actually, it's not, right? This is one of the best times where innovation is happening everywhere. The technology industry is like the grocery industry. Every company is a tech company. And there are new inflections which are happening there. But then with so much money coming into the industry, what I realized after looking at the data, which is pretty obvious, the money was going into follow-on companies, which were momentum companies. 500,000 companies got formed between the second quarter of 2020 to second quarter of this year. But then if you look at over the last 5 years, money has doubled or tripled into the venture industry. But angel deals are down, seed deals are flat, early stage investments are flat in numbers. And overall deals are only up from 10,000 to 12,000. So it's time for prominent sandhill firms like people who are here to go back to their roots and do what we do well. And I think after this post, I don't know, A16Z announced a $400 million fund. Greylock announced a $500 million fund. And I think there are many more to come. So at least that trend went right.
All
He's
right.
got one.
It's not the end of venture capital as we know it today. So let's get down to our trends. But before we turn to the panelists, I want to bring in our audience who are with us both here in person. I'm so excited about that. And also online virtually. We want to know which trends you think will be one of the top trends over the next year. So if you're in person, please scan the QR code you see listed on these screens here. For our audience who are participating virtually, please use the polling link we provided in the chat to make your selection. And we will share all of the responses at the end of this program. We want to hear from our experts now. We have asked each of you to identify the top tech trend that will have the most meaningful impact in the next 4 to 5 years. Each panelist will have up to 4 minutes to make their case, and then we will have a debate, an agreement or disagreement on whether each trend will last for the long run. Each panelist will then have a minute to explain their reaction. At the end of this program, the audience will also have the opportunity to rank the trends themselves and vote. Now to our first trend. Ore Adeyemi, we are all ears. Reminder, you have 4 minutes.
So the trend I'm going to talk about is co-creator economy 2.0, beyond the side hustle. First off, when I heard about the topic, non-obvious trend, I struggled a bit, really, thinking about if it is a trend, shouldn't it be obvious in the first place? But great, kudos to the organizers. I love the challenge. So here goes. So co-creator economy 2.0, the side hustle. Do you all remember when LinkedIn was just a digital version of your business card? That was it. It was just about the job that you were doing. Then now LinkedIn is about content. There's inspiration, there's motivation, there's education, a lot of learning, emotion. Listen, I've read some LinkedIn posts where I've shed a few tears, frankly. But I find that fascinating. But what's even more interesting is the way people describe themselves. So let's take this. We have this principal engineer at big tech firm, let's call it Cisco. I'm not picking up Cisco. She's an engineer. She's a board advisor. She's an entrepreneur. She's an influencer. It's just amazing how she describes herself. And this, frankly, people, it's not an identity crisis. It's real. It's the side hustle. That's what it's about. It's a side hustle. It's not just driving Uber that is the side hustle, but these other things that are happening that people are doing and legitimately doing it. So what are the key drivers? You know all the stats around the gig economy. You know the stats about people wanting to do more freelancing work, freedom around work. But the conversation has shifted to the Great Resignation. That's been the narrative over the past 1 year, where because people want to do different things, if the office or their job does not allow them to do it, they're going to go on and get another job. So it's not about the Great Resignation. I actually think it's about the Great Liberation. Just keep going. Just keep going to the next slide. It's about the Great Liberation, and this Great Liberation is what is fueling what I call this co-creation economy. So what is this co-creation economy? Is the whole idea of people that are not leaving their jobs, but looking to co-create, working with founders, working with other startups. So please go to the last slide so I can show it. So we have platforms like Groupa, Object Astra, where individuals are now co-creating, building new companies, helping find the next big thing without leaving their jobs. So you have my principal engineer who's at Cisco or could be at Facebook, who's co-creating with another founder. She's well paid. She's not looking to leave her job. And that's a trend that we're beginning to see. So what do I find exciting about this is not just that they have platforms like Groupa happening. I don't know how many minutes I have left. But you don't have platforms like Groupa, but we're going to have new opportunities coming into play. Think about it. I'm a fintech investor and invest in technology around financial services. 30 more seconds. I invest in technology around financial services, but there will be platforms that support this trend around co-creation, where this engineer is going to have more than one job. She's not going to leave her job to be a founder, and she's going to work Of course, there are issues that we have to deal with, issues around IP, issues around conflicts of interest. So lawyers amongst you, billable hours will come your way, I guarantee that. But this is going to be a great thing. It's already happening with likes of Groupa. I'm excited about it, and it's going to change the game over the next 3 to 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aurora. HSBC Ventures. Now, panelists, this is the fun part. You get to vote now. Do you agree or disagree with his predictions? Hold up your card.
Yeah, you do.
It's more fun to disagree.
Love this.
Let's see. Which one is a better
Choose
color?
carefully, Naveen.
I just invested in a company in this theme, so we've got to.
Okay, I'm going to go with disagreement first.
I think you're super close to the thesis we love, but I think of it as more future of work to unlocking the potential. Yes, for the part-timers, but even more important, to unlock that for your actual job, for your real employment, happier, more productive, more engaged. And so the part that I didn't like about that was this idea of like monetizing the side hustle and the idea of people having really encouraging the 4 jobs or the double jobs and those sorts of things. I fear that's overthinking it. Where really what is so compelling about this, and a lot of those companies I completely think are on trend, is this idea of supercharging the knowledge worker wherever they may be, taking out a lot of those barriers, and then certainly unlocking the creator economy in that way. But I fear you're overthinking it by a step unnecessarily.
Do you want a rebuttal?
I think, I obviously disagree, but I think the way it's going to work, maybe it's not going to be 4 jobs, it's going to be 2 jobs. And I actually believe that the big tech firms might get in on this as well. So if, I've had people pitch to me and I go, well, don't you still work at Cakebook? And they say, yes, I'm working there, but I'm still involved in this project. And they are, I have their blessing to do that as well. So it's not, I don't think, this is not the gig economy. This is not people, advising. This is just, very select co-creation happening that's beyond advisory. And what's driving it? It's not going to be, it's not just like a usual side hustle where you just want to get paid or supplement your income. This is really true value creation, but maybe not 4 jobs, but I can see 2 opportunities. I wouldn't even call them jobs.
Sarah, you held up the green. So do you want to back up his thesis for us?
Yeah. So, what Ori describes, I actually think if you look at it from the individual's perspective and then the business's perspective, just like media companies have multiple business models, individuals, they see themselves as having, multiple dimensions that they're going to go get economic value out of. And one of the things that I see is companies are more and more interested in the dimensions of like every person that works for them beyond, their core work, right? And an example would be, I really believe in community-driven growth as a trend, right? And one thing that we see now in our portfolio companies is they will hire people who have social media followings, who create content, who have a network where they're teaching other people a skill because of that side hustle, right? Because of their influence within a community. And so I'd say like sometimes these things do not have to be in disagreement.
Great. Let's move on to our next trend from Naveen, who is a managing director at Mayfield. You have 4 minutes.
So my prediction is biology is the technology platform that will not only save the world, but also reinvent several trillion-dollar industries. We all know our world is in crisis. It's been seen with climate change and global warming. There is melting of glaciers, devastating floods, forest fires, still in the middle of the COVID-19 tragedy. And then we have a huge problem. With the growing population and the wealth that is being created, economists fear in order to keep up with the demand and consumption, you need the natural resources equivalent to 5 Earths. So what's the solution? We can't have 5 Earths. Maybe with some of the rockets, we can get to another Earth. But let's look at, so first of all, VC's job is to dream about the future, and so do entrepreneurs. But what I did is in picking 8 examples where biology platforms are being used. This is all work that is happening at seed stage startups, academic institutions ready to be commercialized, and at research labs. I don't need to talk about health. That's an obvious application of biology. We saw it with mRNA, and there'll be many, many new things which will get created. Food 1.0 has already happened, where there is meat and milk without the cow. Now we're going to enter food 2.0, where you'll be actually able to have tasty meat using biofarming, which uses regenerative incubation. There is work on eco-conscious materials from seaweeds to fiber, to building concrete, which is carbon negative, to even building sneakers with biopolymers. Similarly, there's furniture being built without wood from the trees, with wood substitutes. These things exist. There's fashion with leather from mushrooms. Now, whether it happens or not, the pilots of those things are happening. Clean beauty is happening, where facial creams and skincare creams are being created using bioproteins. There's even work happening with companies on ocean agriculture, where you can grow crops in high salt conditions. And finally, call me crazy, not me, the entrepreneur who's working on this, that came and pitched me, that he thinks that in a single DNA, the size of a cube of sugar, you can store as much information as that in a data center. Now, some of these things could take 10 years. That's the job of a VC. But I think many of them will get to a point where we'll be able to feel and touch it over the next 3 to 4 years. For people who are entrepreneurs, bio-entrepreneurs come from everywhere. They're scientists, they're in any region, they're entrepreneurs, and it's been an honor to work with some of these on this slide. And I really want to honor each of these people for the work they're doing to change the world and make it a better place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naveen. Now, panelists, please raise your card in agreement or disagreement on this thesis, which again is biology will save the world. Whoa, okay.
It's good.
Let's go.
This is going to be fun.
And maybe you didn't judge me on this, but I'm judging you on this. I totally agree with everything Naveen said. But the issue with it is, I think it's obvious. It's the non-obvious bit that I struggle with, because I totally see it. There are companies that are doing this already. So is it sort of something we're not? I think it's more or less even mainstream now. So that's it. So I do agree with everything you said.
Okay, that's good.
So I give you a red on the technicality.
I love that. Sarah, you also disagreed.
You know, it's kind of similar. Like, I want to believe in Naveen's future, and I do. Like, we just invested in an AI-driven bio company that I'm thrilled about. But I think that, you know, the devil's in the details with a lot of venture, right? And the time scale of 3 to 5 years does not match the cost curve for what I think is going to make bio in many of these industries, or the innovations that bio entrepreneurs bring, competitive.
Okay.
10 years, you're right.
Why don't we have one on your side here?
We're all in. We manage billions of dollars. We have an active healthcare and biotech practice. So my partners, Steve Krause and Andrew Hedin, agree violently. And I'm gonna double click on one of the subsegments. I think the hard part, and certainly to your point, it's a massive market, and it's obvious, but also wildly hard to figure out, what are the sub themes there. And so we love that entrepreneurs out there are fighting these fights, and want to talk to them.
Naveen, any last words?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the science part of it is still unproven. The applications are obvious, but it's going to take time for these things to happen, because as you mentioned, scaling and capital is going to be a huge issue. So I think if I go back and dream, it's possible, but so is every software company. But genius is only 1% inspiration, which is what I was showing. It's 99% perspiration. So if I look at it 10 to 15 years, will the world get there? I think half of it will come true. But in the next 3 to 4 years, it's going to be challenging. right? So it's going to be a balanced thing that we see end up happening.
If I recall correctly, you said climbing Mount Everest is your tagline, right?
Yep.
Sarah, let's go to you next. It's your turn to present your trends. You are general partner at Greylock.
So the climate crisis is not new, and it's not at all obvious that we're at a turning point. Actually, if you even say the words clean tech in a venture boardroom, several experienced partners will spontaneously combust in panic. I've done this. But I think in the next 3 to 5 years, software will supercharge sustainability. So climate is an acute problem. 5 of the last 6 largest wildfires in California happened in 2020 for the history that we have on record since 1932. These wildfires, droughts, floods, storms, sinking cities, like these are not risks we predict for 2050. They're happening as crises today. At the same time, a lot of the key sustainable technologies are finally competitive. They've come down that cost curve that Naveen and I were just talking about. A solar photovoltaic electricity went from 4 times as expensive as natural gas a decade ago to cost competitive. And with lithium-ion batteries, a quarter the cost they were a decade ago, Tesla has become the fastest growing car manufacturer in the world. And their batteries finally outlive the human bladder. Investors are an important part of this mix. And I don't mean us, VCs. I mean the large institutional investors who hold a huge swath of the debt and equity of every large corporate. JP Morgan, America's biggest bank, said earlier this year that they're going to commit $1 trillion toward financing green initiatives over the next decade. $1 trillion. Just as important is their push for sustainability disclosure. So if you look back at 2012, 20% of the S&P 500 published a sustainability report. Last year, that number had crossed 90%. This is a big difference. Naysayers will say, they'll cry greenwashing. They'll point out that this self-reporting is incomplete and it's unaudited, and they're right. But it's a good start. And we're in the middle of a tidal wave of change in terms of standardization and regulation of this reporting. In March of this year, the EU's sustainability disclosure, financial sustainability disclosure regulation came into force. It's a mouthful, but it means that we are going to see standardization around this. And then the important thing as well is that this is mainstream with consumers. It's not just the Greta Thunbergs of the world. It's everyone, especially the younger generation. McKinsey research will show that brands that market as sustainable are growing 5 to 6 times the speed of the average brand and market. So this matters from a business perspective, and it sets the foundation for, now that we have some of the hard tech, for the easy tech, the software to accelerate the transition. How does this happen? So businesses, because of cloud computing, because of the ability to collect data, they're operating more and more online and transacting with the rest of the value chain online. That means they're more traceable in terms of their impact. Because the collection of that data and the analysis of that data has become so much more sophisticated, we actually know what that means in terms of impact. It's transparent what the sustainability impact of any business is. And we know what levers companies can pull to change their sustainability profile. I think after data comes actual change, right? Environmental mitigation. And here, I think that can be mediated by the internet, a technology we already have. It's amazing for connecting unknown actors in transactions, right? You and I, we can go and book a house in a foreign country from somebody we don't know because we trust Airbnb to vet that home. We trust our fellow travelers to leave reliable reviews. And it's created this whole class of new real estate entrepreneurs. I think the same will happen in sustainability, where the better the marketplace is, the more people will choose environmental mitigation efforts, right? And so we'll be able to plant a tree with every purchase on Shopify or monitor carbon projects remotely. You cannot manage what you don't measure. And this time, we actually have the data. I think that software will supercharge sustainability, and it will enable, the energy transition by giving people the incentives, the insights, and the choices to make that transition happen, hopefully fast enough.
Thank you so much. Now, panelists, please raise your cards in agreement or disagreement to Sarah's trends.
Could we do orange?
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about it.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what I was going to say.
Okay. Byron, what did you say?
Oh, I really hope you're right. And yet, every time I see these Bitcoin discussions about how money versus environmental impact, it's just such a frustrating discussion. There will definitely be great businesses that are created and do good on these trends. And I think you're right that the data, the software layer, et cetera, is the underlying enabler. The three pillar areas didn't totally land with me, and the idea of the marketplace notion and the data orientation, those things. I'm not seeing the pull yet, and I'm seeing people come at it from a cost-based perspective of compliance or check the box, and that's frustrating. But I hope and think probably at the core you're right that the market needs to get there because our planet needs it too, and so maybe it's not in 3 years, but hopefully the trend is there.
Naveen?
Yeah, so I think I want it to happen, right? It intuitively makes sense. But having invested, as you mentioned, right, like 10 years back in clean tech and then haven't seen this movie, people do a lot of talk about ESG and they talk about sustainability. But when it comes to writing the checks and the economic impact and the ROI, things get delayed. So there has to be a pressing event. Am I going to get fired if I am not following something? So that's the place where I feel red, right, on the market timing, because we believe this is going to be a trend. But why now? At least we haven't been able to answer that.
I'm actually very curious to hear your thoughts.
So I'll give you an example. HSBC, one of probably the world's largest trade bank. Most of the trade that happens globally passes through HSBC. So for us, sustainability is a key thing. ESG, not just the environment, but even the social and the governance as well. So the points that Sarah touched on around data, transparency, marketplaces, we're already investing in companies. So I'll give you an example. There's a company called Myotech, started by some grads here from Stanford and Columbia. They're based in Hong Kong now, and where they're able to gather ESG data of companies in Asia, Chinese companies, and that information is being used by asset managers. So we have asset managers at HSBC being able to ingest that information to make decisions on where to place their bets. So data, I think, is a big area around ESG. Transparency is another bit. We have a company that is sort of affiliated with HSBC called Sarai as well.
All right, it sounds like you agree with me.
I do. I do. That's why I agree with you.
No. Where's the rest?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it's like, I'm saying we're doing it. That's my point. And just like you, we invested, we invested in the likes of Bloom, which turned out okay. We invested also in one that didn't turn out okay, which was before its time. So, but I think things have changed. Our customers are demanding for it. It's important that we have that transparency. So the areas, marketplaces, data, I totally agree with you that it's a space where we're going to continue to see companies and corporates have taken the lead on this. So for one, I actually feel them a bit ahead of the traditional VCs this time around. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Sarah, do you have any last words? Rebuttal?
Yeah, I would say so. A friend of mine who's a venture capitalist who's been through a few more cycles and I have said, like, you should figure out with any technology if it's still with the physicists, if it's with the engineers, or if it's with this just us layman software people, right? And you invest in the last bucket because that's the timing that you can control. And I think that's really interesting because I'm betting that enough of these technologies have come to a point in the cost curve and enough of the investor base and the consumer base cares for us to make a big difference and perhaps make a killing as investors. But I'd also say, with full recognition, perhaps the future belongs to the unscarred optimists who did not invest in Solyndra, right? And we'll see.
Okay, well, we will see.
Others.
Last but not least, Byron Deeter, you're up next. Remember, you have 4 minutes.
Okay, well, I think the setup's been good because I'm going to make an appeal back to real tech and build off of Naveen's point of the absence of early stage seed and Sarah's setup with the do you want the easy software or do you want the physicist and chemist? And I'm going to appeal to the physicists and chemists out there, but hopefully also the investors by saying that the over-rotation to the easy has left a pretty big void in real fundamental innovation. And the categories that I would highlight, cloud computing is at our core, but if we take it a level up to space within the rocket space, this year we've seen Rocket Lab, SpaceX, et cetera, have immense success, but also then the sensors and observation stacks, companies like Spire starting to show what's possible there. Boom Supersonic, which is attempting, for commercial flight. Then if you go down into the food tech science areas that we've touched on, plant-based, cell-based meats, that you're starting to see a complete disruption in what's possible in the supply chain there. But again, still upstream science that's underway. If we think more broadly in terms of what's possible in the compute side, I think there's a very clear case that quantum computing could become the most fundamental innovation of the century. And we're on the cusp of some, crazy science that's happening there. Those are innovations that are completely non-obvious, unproven, and mathematically the vast majority of them will fail. But if one of those works, it will be transformative to our generation, and we're on the cusp of that. And I'd also put power back in there. It's a segment that's been abandoned largely, but battery tech, nuclear tech, power is power. And when you think about the problems that our world is facing and the magnitude of the prize for success, I absolutely believe within your 3-year horizon, investments could be made now at the science level that will be entering commercialization, that will have then appreciation to justify the capital to take them to market and achieve meaningful financial milestones in the medium term with immense prizes in the long term that make the software things that we do often day in, day out seem trivial in terms of dollars and in terms of impact.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's Byron from Bassimo Venture Partners. Now, panelists, let's vote one more time. Agree or disagree on Byron's trends here.
Oh, of course you're right. But that's my issue, right? Like you're making a bet on fundamental innovation. Will there be fundamental innovations across this broad set of categories that's super important to the world over the next 3 years? Absolutely. And I hope you and I get some of them, but it is obvious.
All right.
The technicality.
Warming up, guys.
I think I learned
But
some.
you just said it's not obvious. You said you don't bet on the physicist. You bet on the.
Oh, no. I said somebody gave me this advice. So I'm, it's in an area like climate when everybody's like, boo, I feel like you have to make it feasible.
My esteemed panelist just told me my answer is very similar, right? Like to her, I didn't realize it has to be obvious that it's going to happen. The only other thing where I would disagree is, and it's going to happen in biology too, in 3 years, a lot of this stuff may not commercialize because these are not engineering problems in some of these areas. This is not like fixing software. Even chips take more than 3 years, right? So generally what you're saying, completely agree. But in 3 years, I don't know. But I 100% agree that whether it's chemistry for batteries, whether it's physics and biologists, that's where we need to be innovating as an industry.
I should clarify the rules are 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
Well, and Byron's going to get marked up in the time anyway.
Right.
So you had me here. Then when I heard quantum computing, that's when you got me. I think you're right. And looking at it from financial services, the use cases that we're seeing in that space, largely unproven, but you'll be shocked. Things are happening even on a daily basis. So and my team, we're spending quite a lot of time with companies in that space and applicability to financial services and markets, even around cybersecurity as well. That's one of the conversations I had early this morning with one of the big quantum computing companies. So I think everyone's been talking about QC as 10 years from now, but I think the 3 to 5 year, we will see some proven technology that will be brought to market.
You want any final thoughts?
I agree with the objections in the sense that you hope to have milestones in the medium term that justify continued investment and appreciation. I'm on the board of a Sila Nanotechnologies in the battery tech space. They're 10 years old and just released cells on shelves product. It's an amazing innovation, but it's 3 times longer than we expected to get there. This stuff's hard, and we have multiple quantum computing investments right now. And the bet is that in 3 years, they will have achieved such amazing milestones that it will justify continued investment. But in terms of the arc of their impact, Naveen's absolutely right that you have to be long-term believers. And hey, it's contrarian and not easy in the sense of in the venture world, it's a lot easier to go do another consumer app that'll get marked up 100% in a year, and you can move on, but it's less fun at times. And I do think that the world needs more true risk capital and more true risk entrepreneurs out there to do the fundamental innovation.
Agree.
Thank you so much for a great discussion. Round of applause, everyone. I just thank you so much for putting this together. It'll be super interesting to see which one the audience will vote on. So this brings me to my next point. We have another vote now on which of these trends that were just presented will be the most impactful. So the question is up. QR code on the screen. Please vote on the trend that best matches the following criteria: compelling, non-obvious, and a relatively short-term time frame, 3 to 5 years of being realized.
So Sarah's bots are voting now. It's going to be amazing.
Don't call me on it.
Okay, so the instructions are there for those, again, who are joining us virtually. You should have a link to vote virtually in the chat box. The results we will reveal at the very end of this program. I am now pleased to introduce to our special guest, Cathie Wood, who is the CEO and Chief Investment Officer of ARK Invest. With over 40 years of experience identifying and investing in tech and innovation, Cathie founded ARK to solely focus on disruptive innovations while adding new dimensions to her research. Cathie will be joined by Jeff Thomas, who is NASDAQ's Senior Vice President and Head of Western U.S. Listings and Capital Markets. Jeff, Cathie, we're looking forward to your conversation. Take it away.
Thanks so much. Cathie, thanks for joining us. Where are you in the world today?
I am in Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida, which, believe it or not, is becoming a hotbed of innovation.
It really is. We've seen a lot of the migration out of Silicon Valley during the pandemic, and definitely broadening the reach where all the venture capitalists have to spend their time. No longer are people making the trudge up and down Sand Hill Road. A lot of virtual Zoom meetings for sure.
Indeed.
Well, Cathie, we're so excited to hear your thoughts on some of these technology trends that we've been going through today. So let's start with the trends that were laid out by the panel. Which of the trends resonated the most with you?
Because of the convergences between and among technologies, I think the most unexpected outcomes are going to be in the genomic space. So we've got the convergence of DNA sequencing, artificial intelligence, gene editing, and other gene therapies that are going to cure disease. And I think what's unexpected also, now we're in the public equity markets, what's unexpected about this is there are a lot of large biotech companies that have been embracing these technologies. Their returns on investment have suffered during the last 20 years. They've gone from 30% to 7% on average. And we believe that the combination of these technologies, even for those big companies, we're not talking about the startups here, and the younger companies could return to the golden age of the 80s and 90s, those 20-30% returns. So it's pretty provocative and life-changing as well. We're going to cure disease. And for the first time, because of this convergence of technologies, we're going to be applying real science to healthcare decision making. So it's pretty exciting. And I think the setup here is most of the analysts, certainly in the public markets, are used to interpreting every word of the FDA, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Technology is going to blow through that model and create a completely different paradigm.
So when you think about some of the technologies that these companies are using, is there just as big an opportunity for the companies that are supplying that technology to those biotech companies? Or do you think most of the gains will accrue to the biotech companies themselves?
No. The ecosystem here is enormous. The tools companies are very important, DNA sequencing, and really the baton is shifting from short read sequencing to long read sequencing, which is much more accurate, much more comprehensive. So the decision making is going to be that much better. Today, we heard about results from a company named Freenome in the liquid biopsy space. Now, pancreatic cancer is the deadliest cancer out there, meaning once people find out they have it, it's usually stage 3 or 4, and it's very aggressive. This company now is able to identify through liquid biopsy and artificial intelligence, critically, pancreatic cancer in stage 1. So really life-changing. And we do believe in the future that because of artificial intelligence, we will be able to understand when our genomes are going to start misfiring, there will be programming errors. The body sets up for programming errors. AI will be able to identify that. So wouldn't it be amazing to understand that we are preventing cancer before stage 1? We believe that's going to happen.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like biology will save the world is probably your top pick. Let's hit on a couple of the others here. So on software for sustainability, obviously non-financial metrics, especially ESG data, is a very hot topic in the world of public investing right now. What do you see in terms of innovations in that space?
Well, we just, with Square, ARK Invest held a conference called The B Word, all about Bitcoin and the issues, including environmental, that many ESG advocates were having with Bitcoin. And according to our research, again, this is going to be another convergence of technologies where we believe that utility ecosystems, merchant power producers, utilities themselves, will probably find it in their interests economically to in the event that there's too much sun or too much wind, let the overflow of that power help them mine Bitcoin and actually accelerate the advent of solar. So I agree. We have never invested in solar and are just now getting interested in it because the economics are there. We don't need subsidies. And we actually think that Bitcoin, as a part of an energy ecosystem, could contribute to sustainability by accelerating the proliferation of solar and wind.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the challenge with those sources of energy is the temporal nature. And of course, we just talked a little bit with Byron about some of the cool technology trends in batteries and storage. I know that's an area you've been focused on. What do you see happening there? ARK Invest is probably recognized for two things. One is Tesla and one is Bitcoin, for better or for worse. We do so much more than that, but we have learned so much from the controversy and from our research, of course, around Tesla. This is one of the most exciting areas for investing. May not be curing disease, but it's going to create a huge amount of revenue. So here's an example of another convergence between and among technologies. Autonomous taxi networks
And we do believe those will be with us within the next 5 years. Elon would say tomorrow. We would say probably within the next 18 months. And the convergence of three of our major platforms are going to create, we believe, $10 to $12 trillion in revenues globally in the next 10 years from zero today. So what is this convergence? Autonomous taxi networks are the convergence of our robotics platform. Autonomous vehicles are robots. Energy storage, they will be electric. And artificial intelligence, they'll be powered by artificial intelligence. That combination is going to reduce transportation costs dramatically. By our estimates, at scale, it would be possible to drop transportation costs from 70 cents per mile in our own vehicles today, all in, everything, insurance, depreciation, everything, to 25 cents. Now, the convenience factor, however, associated with autonomous travel, we don't have to drive, we can work or whatever, means that we won't have to cut costs, we believe, down to that level. So we believe that this is a $10 to $12 trillion opportunity, and probably the biggest opportunity is in the US. In China right now, which is the other country racing towards this new world, their Uber costs are very low right now compared to ours, maybe a quarter of ours. So the returns to this investment here in the United States are going to be much higher. So we're very excited about an opportunity. And it all started with batteries.
Well, and the other thing it could accelerate, obviously, a lot of folks are putting out mandates or goals in terms of getting to more electric vehicles. Obviously, if you can get people out of their old gas guzzlers and taking these electric autonomous taxis, you could accelerate that change as well.
Well, and that's a really good point, because the capacity utilization of a personal car is 4 to 5%. The capacity utilization of an autonomous electric vehicle will be 50 to 60%. And so what this means is the percentage of vehicle miles traveled in electric vehicles is going to accelerate much faster than expected. This is not about share of cars sold that are electric. This is about autonomous vehicles that will be electric. It's going to be the cheaper way to go. So absolutely, we think the future is bright.
So we've hit on AI, robotics, energy storage, blockchain, DNA sequencing, all your kind of key platforms. You know, I'm sure you, like children, love them all the most, but is there any one that you're most excited about right now?
Well, I mentioned genomics mostly because in the beginning, mostly because of how profoundly it's going to impact our lives. Think about that. First time ever, just because it's possible with the technologies and the costs of the technologies. Those are the two most important variables. We're going to be able to understand. We have 6 billion bits of code in our genomes. We could not understand before where the programming errors were. Where was the needle in the haystack? It wasn't possible. And it was because it was too expensive and the technologies weren't ready. Now the technologies are ready, and we can do this for $500 in a few hours of computing power. This is going to be ubiquitous and is going to transform our lives, and the access to it is going to be profound as well. A lot of people think that technology increases the divide between those who have and those who have not. I don't think that's true. Cell phones tell us it's not true, and this will be another example.
That's fantastic. So on the panel today, we talked about tech trends that we're going to hit and change things in the next 3 to 5 years. If we look out farther, say to 2035, what other technology trends do you think are going to come up in the next 15 years that maybe we haven't talked about just yet?
Well, a lot of our 5 major innovation platforms are DNA sequencing, robotics, energy storage, artificial intelligence, and blockchain technology. Underlying them are 14 different technologies, all of which are operating at a very low base right now. But with time, what we're going to see, and I'm going to come back to this idea of convergence, we're going to see one S curve feeding another S curve, feeding another S curve. And that's going to create explosive growth, explosive energy. So I think if I am correct in the way that investors, both public and private, are looking at the future, they're not yet incorporating the convergence of these technologies and what the impact of one S curve feeding another is going to be. I think also the quantum computing for years now, probably 20 years. I've been going to conferences, talking to professors who have devoted their lives to quantum computing. And they always said, no matter when in the last 20 years, it's at least 10 years away, at least 10 years away. What has happened recently is we are seeing little quantum machines. They're actually starting to happen now. So I still think it's 10 years away, but we have to take it very seriously because it will upend everything that we understand about technology now. And then the other point that I would make, I think someone on the panel referenced it, I think nuclear is going to make a comeback. And part of it is ESG related. During our B Word conference, Elon Musk said, I think nuclear is we got to go nuclear. And of course, in the ESG world, that has been anathema because of Fukushima and all of the accidents. But now the technologies have evolved. They're more modular, more environmentally friendly. And we had done work 10, 15 years ago, suggesting that this was the safest energy source, meaning number of accidents, and the cleanest energy source. So I would focus on nuclear, I think, a little bit more than people are right now.
So as you look at the 14 underlying technologies of your 5 key investment platforms, how often do you refresh that? And then when do you look at, new technologies that should be added into that? What's that process look like?
Well, what's interesting about this moment in history is the seeds for it were planted during the 20 years that ended in the tech and telecom bubble. And of course, that ended badly. The reason it ended badly is the technologies were not ready. So Oracle and Cisco were not going to lead us into the brave new world. In fact, they fought cloud computing every step of the way and software-defined networks. And the costs were just way too high. So it has taken 20 to 25 years of gestation for these technologies to evolve to a point where they're ready for prime time and for the cost to drop low enough. So I think the 14 that we have, I'll rattle some of them off. So it's adaptive robotics. Some of these are incorporated into the platforms themselves. They are all, but they are the same wording. 3D printing, autonomous mobility, battery systems, cloud computing, neural networks, frictionless value transfer, so digital wallets, blockchain technology, mobile connected devices, Internet of Things, reusable rockets, sequencing technology, gene editing, and immunotherapy. The seeds for those were planted a long time ago, and I believe and I'm sure they're going to spawn even more innovation. An innovation platform, from our point of view, meets 3 characteristics. 1, learning curves, which are characterized by cost declines. 2, they cut across economic sectors, meaning they're going to become very big ideas. And 3, they're launching pads for more innovation. So we're looking to these major platforms for the next sources of innovation. Meanwhile, they're ready for prime time. And I think the big story of the next 10 to 15 years convergence between and among these technologies that are not only going to create explosive growth and exponential growth trajectories, but will also, and this is very important, cause a lot of creative destruction. And I believe that investors who have been aligned with the big benchmarks out there are going to have to reassess. And I know that NASDAQ has the next generation of leaders, which is a great idea after the NASDAQ 100, because we think that's where the action is going to be.
Well, and last question. So on the topic of the NASDAQ 100, we obviously have all the FANG stocks that everybody knows listed on NASDAQ. How do you think that index, which tracks the 100 largest companies on NASDAQ, will change over the coming years, given some of these technology disruptions?
Well, and this is NASDAQ 100. So you think growth, right? Now, when I say creative destruction, most people think, okay, value stocks are going to have big problems. And we think they will, many value industries and sectors. You wouldn't know it from the market today, but we think that is true. If you look at the NASDAQ 100, and I don't have to tell you this, Jeff, I think 45% of the NASDAQ 100 is Microsoft and the FANGs. And then they're $1 trillion plus companies now. So congratulations. But when you look through the rest of the NASDAQ 100, what you see is, yes, roughly 25% of that index is truly transformative. They're the smaller cap stocks. If you look at the other 25, a little more than 25, what you see are more sustaining technology companies. So like 5G. 5G is not truly transformative. We've had 2, 3, 4, 5, probably 1G as well. I'm sure we did, right? But within that category also, we believe there are going to be growth companies that are going to face creative destruction. So again, I would advise investors to look very carefully at the convergences between and among technologies that are going to take place and disintermediate and disrupt even some of our stalwart growth companies. So I think your next generation idea, next generation index idea is right for the times.
Fantastic, Kathy. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your insight, and your wisdom on these future technology trends. We really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Kathy and to Jeff for a really interesting conversation. If I've learned anything as a journalist, I wish I had my laptop with me. Always headline anything that Kathy says. It's the number one rule in our newsroom. Now let's find out the results of our poll. But before we do that, I do want to bring it to our panelists for any reaction to Kathy's remarks. I saw you nodding a few times, Naveen, so do you want to start?
Yeah, no, I think I've been a big fan of her work. And the thing that resonated the most with me was thinking about the convergence of the different things we are looking at. A lot of time, venture partnerships work as silos, entrepreneurs work as silos, but a lot of times when you look at the whole system, big things happen, right? Like Tesla did that. It was not just one thing, or Apple. So I think it was very enlightening to hear that, and how to apply that to the kinds of things we do and things which become massive, how they have those kinds of characteristics. So thank you.
Sarah, do you have anything to add?
You know, my impression was very similar to Naveen's in that we try always to look at the things, the tribal knowledge of like how to build a cloud software company or a consumer growth app, for example. But then, more important is always keeping the beginner's mind about foundational technology changes, right? And that tribal knowledge, it ages very quickly, right? Because foundational changes that converge, they break your model, right? We were lucky enough to be investors in Facebook. It broke a bunch of models, right? We were lucky enough to be investors in some of the first great cloud companies, and like nobody knew then. And so I definitely think it's a great reminder of like looking at these foundational technologies and then having a beginner's mind about how they will, impact even growth stocks. I think that's a really interesting concept.
Rory?
I was just thinking a few words as Kathy was speaking. One was this convergence idea, which I totally agree with, and investors tend to miss out on that. The other two sort of themes that resonated with me as you were speaking had to do with access. So accessibility with technologies and how, when you look at the cost declines as well with these technologies, actually spurs growth. So, I mean, we see that happening in the EV industry where, folks from different backgrounds will be able to access this. So I think that was a key theme that resonated with me.
What about you, Ryan?
I'll confess I didn't fully follow the thread on Bitcoin energy consumption being good for ultimately, alternative energy sources. I can see the attempt to make that case. I think it's I think it's a little bit of trying to justify immense energy consumption. But the vast majority of the mega trends I vehemently agree with. The term we use at Bessemer is road mapping, very similar to the thematic areas. And I think there's just a time shift by stage of investing where a lot of the things that you're able to exploit on the global and public scale now are trends that we certainly have been excited about, and the successful ones played out to where they are now public companies. And so cloud computing is certainly one that I am glad you highlighted, because it's in my mind, the mega trend of this kind of late stage private and early stage public market. It's now increasingly obvious, but cloud will become the majority of all software in the coming 2 years. Software is increasingly the driver of hardware value, and it's absorbing, hardware and services economics in large scale. And there's 2.9 trillion of public pure play cloud market cap, not even including the fact that the Amazon that we know of today, its market cap is driven by AWS, not by Amazon.com. And majority of its market cap is because of their cloud business. You look at Azure within Microsoft, and increasingly you look at Ali Cloud or Google Cloud. And those are, growth drivers for them. And so that is very much, the platforming layer for many of these mega trends, including, I think, your point on healthcare and the potential for personalized medicine because of big data, because of cloud, because of machine learning and AI overlays will be absolutely impactful in our lifetimes in a massive way.
Thanks again to Kathy Wook of ARK Invest and Jeff Thomas, NASDAQ Senior Vice President, Head of Western U.S. Listings. Now let's turn to the results of our 2 polls that we took earlier in the session. The first poll shows, if we can bring that one up, what the audience thoughts on the top tech trends. This is before you all presented. Let's see if any of your initial trend selections made the cut. Looks like we have life science and health at the very top, energy and environment, and food as the top 3. The second poll, which we will show now, shows the results of which trend everyone thought was the most impactful. See a little fist bump right there? Let's take a look, see how these 2 polls compare. So you two seem to have won this
just Naveen, actually.
Just Naveen. Yeah. Let's be clear.
Silver medal, you got it.
Doesn't count.
Naveen, why don't you have the final word here on your predictions and being the most impactful prediction in the next 3 to 5 years? The audience has voted.
I think the audience already believed in it.
Okay.
From what you showed. So if it was me or anybody else, the result would be the same. Because they didn't hear what we had to say. They said, those are the top 3. I touched upon
you brought it home. Take the victory lap.
Oh, you're so modest.
No, I think I fundamentally believe that biology is going to essentially save the world. And things which we think are obvious, They're actually not. All these companies and examples I gave for, like quantum computing, they've been in the lab for 10 years, 5 years, 3 years. They might never see the light of the day. But even if 1/10, that's what venture is about, if they do, the world is going to be a better place. And that's why Mayfield is betting big. And the good news is you can get into these companies for $1-2 million for 20 to 30% ownership. It's an ignored market. I'm letting the secret out because, hey, I want to collaborate. And this is the place where two VCs can work together, right? Because at the end, company building is all about diversity. It's all about difference in ideas. And these entrepreneurs need help. These are hard problems. These are not engineering and software problems. So I really believe, right, in it. And I think we're in the golden era of biology, like we were in software and cloud. This is the future.
What percentage of Mayfield's fund will go into biology when we look back
it out.
5 years from now?
Still figuring it out.
Will it change after today?
Like, I think if it's up to my partners, like software will dwindle and biology will keep going up. But you have to have a healthy balance, as we heard from, I think it's at least 1/3 of the fund. We are making the biggest bet as a seed and Series A fund to bet that much on it. And we used to have this in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and then we shut it down because it was just hard. IT and internet was taking off. But having seen the movie with Genentech, Amgen, and Intuitive Surgical, right? Like this time it's like real and it's beyond healthcare. And I think, as you can see, sustainability is the second one. Millennials care about it, right? Like we are investors in companies like Poshmark. Half the millennials last year bought a secondhand good. It is the wave of the future, right? People care about this stuff. So climate change, sustainability, saving lives is critical.
I want to add one thing here. First of all, let's collaborate. Second, I do want to add something in that, like software companies are a less academic practice than they used to be, right? There's a lot of content out there. There's a lot of engineers that have worked for big tech companies. And not that there is a playbook, like every company is idiosyncratic, but it's a lot easier to start a software company than it used to be. AWS, access to capital, it's not very capital intensive, right? And one of the things that, we're probably behind you guys on this, but we do believe, especially in biology for healthcare, most obvious one, right? In that some of the entrepreneurs we're working with, they're academics, right?
Yep.
And this used to be true in software, right? Like you had or in software and hardware and electrical engineering overall, but you had more innovation coming out of academia. And like, we think that's going to be true in bio. And like these entrepreneurs, like they need more help company building, and we're really excited to do it.
And they do, because they're coming from a science background, and the knowledge the venture capital industry has gathered from funding semiconductor companies, software companies, disk drive companies, it's the same which is needed, right? It's hard work, but if you're working on changing the world, I think this is it, right? Like with climate change, we're living it, right? Like, look, people are trying to go eat good food in Napa, and what happens right? Like, it's just unpredictable. Global war, it's here to stay. It's beyond the pandemic.
I think in my near future, I will be writing a new headline, Mayfield and Greylock co-lead a new round in some kind of biology startup.
It'll be soon. That's what we're going to collaborate now.
We have some audience questions, so I want to make sure we leave some time for that. First question from the audience. As a Columbia grad, I am getting invitations to invest in Columbia affiliated venture funds. Would you recommend investing in in one of these funds? How about Ori?
I don't give investment advice, but I mean, I think if you're going to invest in a fund, you just have to do your due diligence. I think a lot of these schools, even MIT, for me, I'm an alum. We have a fund where MIT alumni can invest in. So I think doing your due diligence in terms of understanding what the underlying thesis is for any of these funds, the exposure that they have maybe to biology, and really understand where the opportunity is. So I can't categorically say invest in a particular fund without understanding the underlying thesis around it. So do the due diligence, and it's a good time to get exposure to different things.
Next question. Many VCs talk about investing in the best teams and leadership, not necessarily the best tech. How do you see the great liberation or work from anywhere affecting the cohesiveness of teams and their effectiveness? How about you, Brian?
So I would agree generally with the thesis where people tend to, take tech and make it great. Yeah. Oftentimes it's an evolutionary process. And certainly the hope is that this great liberation is the equalizer for the best talent in the world to rise to the surface wherever, he or she or they are. And we're certainly seeing that with more of our companies, even if they happen to have a founder near one of our 9 global offices, oftentimes the other co-founders are not. And we think that the ability to assemble dynamic, diverse, and collaborative teams will be stronger. And from our standpoint, one of our largest portfolio companies, Shopify, at $200 billion, said they will not have a headquarters anymore, that it's office optional. Mm-hmm. And certainly if Shopify can make it work, then, the new startup down the street.
I broke that news, by the way.
Well played. And it created ripples. We did a webcast with, Jeff from Twilio, Ben from Pinterest, and Toby from Shopify at the start of COVID.
They started a trend. That was early. Yep.
And said, talk through how you're approaching this. Mm-hmm. And it was real time. And some of those conclusions were massive. Mm-hmm. And so I certainly think that this will have very different implications than we expected at the start of this in terms of team assembly and collaboration that will be net positive and lasting even past the mandates and the forced distributed workforces.
The only thing I would add is at the earlier stages of company, this is much harder than companies which have scaled because product development can be asynchronous. But one of the things I've realized, having been a founding investor in so many companies, the investor-investee relationship and being in the zone of trust is so critical. I'm at least trying to figure out in Mayfield, how do you build that zone of trust just on Zoom, right? Because it's not a tactical job like, hey, go do this project, right? So much of it is building the trust, like working together, and I think it'll be a hybrid thing. And VCs will have to get on planes. Entrepreneurs will have to get on planes. Once the zone of trust is there, then it becomes much easier. But that norming and forming, at least we are struggling in the early stage companies, right? How to even evaluate somebody over Zoom, right? Because they get one of my companies got 16 term sheets last week and 14 never met them. And I'm going I don't even know how to react. I thought he was joking. He said, no. So forget about Zoom. People don't even meet. They invest on DEX.
Yep. I'm covering these companies as well, so I believe you.
I'll connect you to him.
No, please. I have a question as well that I didn't get to ask earlier. Every news organization, including ours, has written about the rise of Tiger, disrupting the pace, disrupting the size, the scale, funding announcements. I'm curious to know your thoughts on whether Tiger will be a long-term competitive threat in the future, or is this just something that's happening in this moment in time? Anyone want to take this?
I think it's hard to tell in my mind, right? Like if they make the money and if they're serious about it, they're a great crossover investor, but doing inception stage and early stage investing is not easy. So if they can have the patience, if they can have the will to run a marathon, they're smart people. So I think it's a big threat for venture capitalists. At least I respect them in what they do. But it all depends upon, right, like what their strategy is and are they willing to commit to assets which can be illiquid for 10, 12 years.
I'll ask it a slightly different way, and I'll toss it to you, Ori. What is it like to work with Tiger?
Well, I haven't worked with them, but I have, I know entrepreneurs that have received investments from them. I do think there is a place for everyone. There was a time when the folks that were facing this kind of questions were the corporates. What's your place as a corporate in the world of venture capital, where, and there were views that corporates shouldn't be investing in companies. And then you have the likes of, Tiger and Koto doing investments. So I think it's about value add. That's what venture capital is about, right? Value add. So especially with a lot of stage companies that are looking to IPO, there's value that this hedge fund types can bring, lessons learned that they can bring into these companies. I don't see too many, folks like Tiger playing in the very early stage, like Series A. I think you tend to see them sort of Series C and above. And a lot of them, frankly, don't even ask for board seats, the hedge funds. So I think there's a place for them. It is a competitive threat, and VCs will have to learn to work with them. And corporates face the same thing. It's an evolution of the venture capital space.
We do a lot of business with Tiger. We're co-invested in many companies. Those people are very smart, right? John and others there. And I guess we are playing, not Tiger specifically, but let's say you are chasing growth. And technology, we all believe, is the growth driver for the economy. And it is more and more of the economy. And it's also a very resilient sector. Why wouldn't you go invest in that area, right? We should assume that some of these assets and technology, as it becomes more obvious how, for example, a cloud computing company works, as that business model becomes more obvious to more investors, the returns on some of these companies, as they become more obvious, will go down. Right. And so I think it's a convergence of factors. There's more opportunity than ever. It's the growth driver of the economy. And it's easier to invest in these companies because we understand them in a way we didn't 10 years ago. I would say we are also playing a different game than some of these. There's two different things you can do if you think a neighborhood is good. I think technology is a good neighborhood. I think biology is a good neighborhood. I think other areas of innovation are a good neighborhood. You can choose the best house or the best couple houses, or you can buy the whole neighborhood. Right? I think there's room to play different games. I think it's really tough to buy the whole neighborhood at the early stage.
Byron, want to close us out? Is Tiger eating your lunch?
No, I'd echo Sarah's sentiments, which is, if we're right, these are compelling areas and these companies are staying private until, Stripe at 98 billion. The public investors have to cross over and do this if they want to chase returns. And so I think for entrepreneurs out there, capital is great. For early stage investors, as we are, downstream capital is great. And we co-invest with them all the time. And so certainly valuations are moving up, game on for late stage. But we're adults about it. And if the outcomes are huge, then so be it. And so there's a lot of people chasing deals. There's 16 term sheets on these things. That's competitive as it's ever been. But it's a great time to be an entrepreneur. And frankly, it's still a pretty good time to be an investor with the magnitude of the outcomes.
I love that. It's game on. So thank you so much to our panelists, Ori Adeyemi, Managing Director and Global Head of HSBC Invest, Byron Dieter, Partner at Bessemer Venture Partners, Sarah Goa, General Partner at Greylock, Naveen Chadha, Managing Director at Mayfield. This program has been held in partnership with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, Foundation California Center for Innovation. That is a mouthful. It has also been sponsored by Ford, KPMG, Silicon Valley Bank, and NASDAQ. Special thanks to Kathy Wood of ARK Invest for joining as our guest. I'm Candy Chang of Insider. Now the program is officially adjourned. I hope you all have a very nice evening. Thank you so much.
Great job.
Thanks, Candy.